Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To all of our guests here, peace be upon you all. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss this important topic, how to overcome racism, discrimination, and oppression in the Arab, Black, and Latino community. Today we have an amazing panel of speakers to discuss these vital issues. But before we get started, we will have Brother Mu'tasim recite verses 10 through 13 from chapter 39 of the Quran. Please join me in welcoming Brother Mu'tasim.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إنما المؤمنون إخوة فأصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير.
Takbir. Jazakallah khairan, Brother Mu'tasim, for reciting those verses for us. I'm not going to read the definition to really show the importance of these verses and why we're sharing them with you today. The first one that he recited means, the believers are but brothers, so make settlements between your brothers, and fear Allah that you may receive mercy. O you who believe, let not people ridicule another people, perhaps they may be better than them. Nor let women ridicule women, perhaps they may be better than them. And do not insult one another, and do not call each other by offensive nicknames, wrenched in the name of disobedience after one's faith. And whoever does not repent, then he is the one who are the wrongdoers. O you who believe, avoid much negative assumption. Indeed, such assumption is sin. And do not spy or backbite each other. Would one of you like to eat the flesh of his brother when dead? You would detest it. And fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is accepting in repentance and merciful. O mankind, we have created you from male and female, and made you peoples and tribes, and you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing. These verses were actually recommended to me by one of our MSA members because she felt like they were relevant to the event today. It's important to understand the message that's being sent here, and that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended for us to be different. As stated in the verse, and made you peoples and tribes. It's important to understand that we will never overcome these common obstacles if we continue to be secluded from one another. We must work alongside one another and support another through these trials in hopes of creating a safer and more peaceful community for people of all cultural and religious differences. I now have the pleasure of introducing one of our first speakers I have personally worked alongside with for a few years. Sister Julia, mashallah, I have learned so much from her and so thankful to have had the opportunity to be able to do so much with her. She does so much for our community. Sister Julia Shearson has been serving our community for the past 13 years as an executive director of the Cleveland chapter of CARE, the Council of American Islamic Relations. She received her Bachelor of Arts in East Asian Languages and Columbia University, a master's in linguistics from Ohio State University, and a master's in Middle Eastern Studies from Harvard University. MashaAllah. While at CARE, Sister Julia has been working on civil rights advocacy, educational outreach, and interfaith and media relations. She has also initiated projects to improve community and build partnership between law enforcement and the Muslim community. Please join me in welcoming Sister Julia Shearson.
Assalamu alaikum. So I'm very honored to be here today, especially because there's so many young people in the audience. Your role in our community is extremely important, and it's really important that you all step up and take the lead. I think it's important to understand, if you don't take anything away from tonight, but this one concept, and that is that humanity is one, and that we're all united, we're all creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He's put us here on this planet really as a test to see whether we will stand up against the tremendous injustices that we're seeing in the world, and whether when faced with those injustices we will act maybe callously or with apathy or with a cold heart, or will we take those struggles and challenges on as our own and try to do, if not a great amount about them, at least a little bit amount about them, and at least speak out against these injustices. I think one of the most serious challenges we're facing right now in the world, of course, is how we take care of our planet. This planet has been given to us as this wonderful blue-green. It's almost as if it's heaven on earth, and yet we mistreat it and we abuse it. And when we do that, we really show thanklessness towards our Creator that's given us this wonderful, beautiful planet. So that's the first thing I think we need to really think about as human beings. We also need to think about our fellow human beings, especially those who are very different from us and those we do not know. But the verses from the Quran today talked about Allah making us into nations and tribes, not so that we could despise one another, but specifically so that we could get to know one another. And that getting to know one another and working together on the challenges in the world facing us, that's a divine calling for Muslims. It's not just about, oh, it's nice to do a little bit of interfaith work and get to know your neighbor. No, it's really part of our faith and our calling that Allah asks us to get to know the heart of others. I think He wants to test us to see if we're going to treat His creation, how we're going to treat our fellow man. So that's very important. In light of the 50 million refugees that are fleeing wars, the numbers of refugees are mainly fleeing from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia. These are, very serious areas of conflict in the world, and in many cases, American foreign policy, as misguided as it has been, has created this tremendous flow of refugees. There are more refugees flowing around the world than in any time since World War II. So this is a very serious crisis time, and yet our leaders in America, more than 30 or so, I don't know the number now, governors, have saw fit to try to make a ban against Syrian refugees and others. And frankly, it's very easy to get very angry at those governors, but who I'm most angry at is myself, because we as a community have been, frankly, not as active as we need to be, so that if we were active, no one would dare do such an unjust policy, including right here in Ohio. So our organization got together with at least 50 members of the interfaith community, and we wrote a letter to our governor and told him, while this may be politically popular to try to ban Syrian refugees and Iraqis and Afghans from coming to Ohio, but it will not stand up to the scrutiny of history. And I think he really heard us. Since then, on the campaign trail, he's moderated his speech. He's moderated his speech kind of somewhat against the anti-Muslim hysteria. Now, I don't think we should, mistake necessarily the governor for being on our side at this point, but what I'm saying is it's very important to speak up and speak out and take actions against injustice. So I only have 10 minutes, and I probably already used up 5 of them, and I haven't even got to the topic that I wanted to talk about, but I will keep keep it very brief because I want to get to the panel and I want to get to the dialogue with you, which is really important. But I'm here today really to talk to you about a bill in the Ohio House. It's called House Bill 339. And we have a petition drive against this bill out in the lobby, and we're asking that everyone here today, young, old, citizen or non, it doesn't matter, we're asking you and your families to sign against this bill. It is an anti-Muslim bill. It is a hate bill. And I'll tell you a little bit about the origins of this bill. There's a group of people, basically pretty high-level national security people, and some very pro-Israel, no matter what, type people with a very hawkish foreign policy. And these are people, some from the CIA, some from the FBI, some from high levels of the national security state, as well as their private, kind of public-private partnership with these hate NGOs and think tanks like the Center for Security Policy and the American Public Policy Alliance. They have basically said that Muslims in America are a threat, that our faith is a threat, that our religion is a threat, and that they believe that we're actually here to impose a kind of creeping Sharia or a stealth jihad or a cultural overtake, and that we're trying to overtake the United States and replace our United States Constitution with Sharia. So this is very much like the anti-communist scare or the anti-scare against, you know, the quote-unquote yellow peril, like when the Chinese were coming into America and doing backbreaking labor here, but we thought fit to scapegoat them. It's like the way we hated on the Japanese during World War II and put them in internment camps. It's like the way we used African Americans and we used people from Africa to build this country through their blood, sweat, and tears. That's what's made America this incredibly rich capitalist country, because for hundreds of years it used the backbreaking free labor of humans that were held in bondage, which is one of the cruelest things that could happen to anybody on this planet. The way we treated the Native American Indians. So this is not just against Muslims, and you really need to understand that all of our struggles are one. But the bill is basically saying that our religious practices are a threat to America. So we need you to stand up against the bill. Now, originally in 2010, the state of Oklahoma, 70% of the people in the state of Oklahoma voted to amend their state constitution to ban our religious practices. Now, there aren't that many Muslims out there in Oklahoma, but they thought that they needed an amendment to their state constitution. So that's how serious they're taking it. Now, when we saw that, we said we have to challenge this, because not only does this hurt the Muslim community, but this is against our Bill of Rights, and it's against the First Amendment, and it's against freedom of speech to ban or stigmatize any particular religious group. And if we don't stand up for this, it'll hurt the tapestry of the American Constitution and the freedoms that all of us enjoy. So we stood very strongly against that bill, and eventually the bill was ruled unconstitutional. Okay, so it was a great victory, and that went all the way up to the 10th Circuit Federal Court, and the bill was stated to be unconstitutional to do an overt ban against Sharia. Now, do you think that the people that had this plan, or that are, you know, pretending that there's this terrible threat of Muslims in America, do you think that they just stopped at that moment? Do you think the bill just died and went away? No, what they did was they actually rewrote the language of the bill so it fulfills the same goal, but they changed it so that it doesn't say Sharia, but it says foreign law. So now they're trying to ban any kind of what they call foreign law, and of course Sharia, those are our religious practices. So the fearmongers are back again, trying to promote now in Ohio a modified version of the bill, and it's been introduced. It's House Bill 339, and it's been introduced by Representative Ron Young of Lake County, right up here, Mentor and Painesville that way. So we recently traveled to the State House to challenge this bill on Thursday, and we confronted the people supporting this bill. And the bill is mainly being supported by Frank Gaffney, and here in Ohio by a person, Michael Goldstein, and his wife, Beverly Goldstein, Act for America, the Center for Security Policy, and the American Public Policy Alliance. Such bills restricting religious and foreign law have been introduced in more than 30 states. These are reactionary, neo-nativist measures, and they have unfortunately passed in states like Florida, Arizona, Idaho, Louisiana, Tennessee, North Carolina, Alabama, Oklahoma, Kansas, South Dakota, and I think also now in North Dakota and other states. These bills are promoted by well-funded think tanks and hate groups. Now, this willful demonization of our religious practices is a well-documented tactic of the Islamophobia movement in America. And this anti-Muslim fear-mongering has to be challenged. So we're going to need your support, and we're going to need you to sign on to that bill. Now, there's a lot of groups that are actually against this bill, and I want to tell you who they are so you realize how serious this bill is. The American Bar Association, so the largest legal bar association in the United States, is standing against this bill. This bill is so bad that the Jewish Anti-Defamation League is against this bill because these bills hurt the Jewish community as well, the Jewish halakha, their law, and also can impact Catholic canon law. Now, people on the far right, very pro-Israel, no matter what, hate groups, those groups are still supporting the bill. But moderate people from all faith communities are against this bill, and they've spoken out against it, as well as the Center for American Progress. So if you have any questions about the bill, please do stop by the table outside. Another quick bill I want to speak about, and then I'm about to go off the stage here. I've got 2 minutes, and I can do this in 2 minutes easily. There is a member here from the interfaith community. His name is Doug Kerr, and he is helping work on a what is called an anti-BDS bill. Does anybody know what BDS is? Who? No. Say it out loud. What is it?
Boycott, divestment, sanctions.
Okay, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. So what's happening in Ohio, and of course in the Congress and in other states, the state of Ohio is actually trying to pass a law that says that anybody that does business with the state of Ohio has to basically promise or kind of swear an oath that you would not engage in boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and that you haven't engaged in boycott, divestment, and sanctions. So as we know, there were students in the Ohio State University recently that had kind of locked arms in one of the administration buildings because they're trying to get the Ohio State University to divest its pension fund, I believe, from any organizations or any businesses or pension funds that do business with the state of Israel. And of course, as we know, the funding helps them in the occupied territories perpetrate their injustices there. So basically, the state of Ohio is banning our freedom of speech to engage in boycott, divestment, and sanctions. So this is a very serious issue. We're going to need the community to mobilize. So if you're interested, please see Doug Kerr out in the hall afterward, or email douglas.kerr@case.edu. 2 other quick things I want to tell you about. As we all know, the Republican National Convention is coming to town in July 18th to the 21st. And CARE, we're a nonpartisan organization, so we don't tell people how to vote, and we do not endorse candidates. What we do is help educate our community about the platforms of the various parties and the candidates. And there will be a number of events here in Greater Cleveland that the Muslim community really needs to be a part of, particularly since anti-Muslim hysteria seems to be one of the main planks of the party that is coming to town at the RNC. So it's very important that Muslims get involved in at least 2 of the events that are coming up. One is a poverty march, where there will be a people's march on the very same day as the opening of the RNC on July 18th, a march against poverty. And Muslims should take part of that because of our social justice stance. And then there will also be, in the week prior to the convention, there will be a people's convention. And there will be forums about Islamophobia in different forums. If you have a workshop that you want to do on anti-BDS, there's still workshops that are open. So we really want you to take part in that. And I think Don Bryant is here. He'll be out in the hall. You can talk to him about that. So the takeaway from this really is be engaged. We're asked in Islam, if we see an injustice, we have to try to stand up to change it. If we can't change it through our action, we have to, speak out against it vocally. And, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very merciful for us. If we can't do those two things, He asks us at least, to say that that thing is wrong in our hearts. So, and that's the weakest of faith. So as Muslims, we need to step up. The world's a very challenging place. This is a test from Allah to ask us to do good toward our fellow man, take care of our fellow man, take care of our planet, and to work very hard for social justice. So I'm going to end right there so we can continue the panel. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sister Julia, for providing us with that great information. Our second panelist today was Edward Little. Edward Little is a public policy professional with 15 years of knowledge and experience. He is passionate about the criminal justice policy reform and bringing an end to the over-criminalization of communities of color. He has worked with local school districts to increase the graduation rates of marginalized youth and communities to labor to end the school-to-prison pipeline. He has also facilitated community forums on the importance of police body-worn cameras, civil rights, policies and procedures. He conducted numerous teach-ins on the Department of Justice investigation of the Cleveland Division of Police. Mr. Little is the founding member of and co-chair of the Collaborative for the Safe, Fair, and Just Cleveland. The collaborative works to recommend and to implement reforms to these policies and procedures of the City of Cleveland's Division of Police relating to excessive use of force and discriminatory police patterns and practices. Mr. Little is dedicated to being a strong and advocate for change in the greater Cleveland area, as well as being a powerful voice for the lasting reform, long after the consent decree has been signed and executed. Mr. Little is a transformational speaker and thought leader. Over the past several years, he has given lectures to corporations, government agencies, foundations, nonprofit, faith-based organizations, high schools, colleges, and universities across the country. MashaAllah. Mr. Little holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology from Cleveland State University. We got ourselves an alumni here. Please join me. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Edward Little.
Good evening. And thank you for inviting me here to speak to you today. When Sister Julia asked me, I had to say yes. I can't say no to Sister Julia. This is a very important issue to me, and we work together on a lot of different campaigns. And we are one community. We are brothers and sisters. And oftentimes, Sister Julia and I talk about different issues regarding racial profiling, police policies and practices, international wars and policies of our government, mass incarceration, surveillance. All of these issues impact all of us. And oftentimes, what the media is good at doing is dividing us and making us believe that the issues and challenges of one community do not affect us all. And when I think back to COINTELPRO and how J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI surveilled black activists in the Black Panther Party, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all of these individuals who were fighting for peace and justice, and yet they surveilled these individuals. And the same practices are taking place today. Don't think for a moment that as we sit here to talk about solutions to the challenges that we face in this country, that the FBI is not in here right now, among us, giving you the greeting. They're here. And they're listening to our phone calls, they're monitoring our emails, and they're monitoring our goings and comings and who we're interacting with, under the guise of terrorism or homeland security. Many years ago, it was communism. It changed the name, but the actors are still the same. How do we challenge this? First of all, we have to recognize it when we see it. We have to recognize the rhetoric, and we have to recognize the fact that our media is going to work very closely with the government to demonize all of us when it benefits them. And how do we challenge that? How do we challenge that? It takes a lot of courage. You know, I admire Sister Julia because she exhibits a tremendous amount of courage to stand up in the face of injustice. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to stand up and push back against your government, to tell your government that we will not accept being treated as second-class citizens. But the way we overcome this is we have to stand together. Whether we are black, whether we are white, whether we are Latino, whether we are Muslim, whether we are Christian, whether we are Jewish, we have to stand together as one. Because what has happened historically in this country and around the world, people sit back and look at the oppression of others and say, well, it's not me. And what happens? After they get finished oppressing one group, they come for the next one. I mean, things have not been the same in this country since 9/11. And so when we look at the practices of this country, they haven't changed over time. They use the same strategies, and we know those strategies. But it's time for us to speak with one voice. The wars that are taking place around the world, we know those wars are unjust. But we have to have, this country has to have an enemy. And why do we have to have an enemy? Because having a common enemy gives the people something to galvanize around. Whether it's the Red Scare, whether it's the communists, whether it's the Russians, or whether it's Islam. And each and every leader will stand before the American people and say, we have nothing against the religion of Islam. But yet all your policies and practices speak to the contrary. So when we look at what's going on in Iraq, what's going on in Afghanistan, what's going on between Israel and the Palestinians, what's going on in Syria, what's going on in all parts of the world, these things are not accidents. And it's time for us to, one, understand and push back on the fact that the United States government says that it wants to be the police of the world. What gives you the right and the authority to be the world police? What gives you the right and the authority to be the world police when this country spends more than any other country in the world on its military? So that's what gives you the right? Because you have the biggest guns? Or you have all the guns? So because you have all the guns, you're going to dictate what is justice and what is not justice. What is peace and what is not peace. So because you have the power, you get to say who is peaceful and who is not. Whose cause is just and whose cause is unjust. You can manipulate the United Nations because you have the power and you have the resources. See, that's the other thing that this country uses. It's not only power, but wealth. Not only military power, but wealth to manipulate people, ideologies, and entire countries. Oftentimes we wonder why other countries side with the United States on issues that they know are wrong. But it is because the United States oftentimes holds the purse strings to the food and the humanitarian aid that they need so desperately need. And so when we go back and ask the question, what gives you the right when you are causing wars and brutalizing and killing innocent women and children in one area to point the finger at someone else in another area? When we look at our drone policies in this country, we have to recognize the fact that when we look at television and we look at the news, we don't see our drones destroying villages and communities and countries and killing women and children. We don't see this. They say there was a drone strike, and we got the number 1 or the number 2 or the number 3 or the number 4 or the number 5 on this terrorist list. But do we know that for certain? Are we sure of that? And why is it that this country gets to say who is a terrorist? And so here we are in this space where we are fed this constant diet of terrorism and who is the terrorist and what the terrorists look like. And then they get to define who that is. But when a young man goes into a church and kills innocent people, that's not terrorism. When someone shoots up a masjid, that's not terrorism. When someone decides that they want to take someone's life because of the color of their skin or because of their religion, that's not terrorism. It's not terrorism when it's done in America by so-called Americans. But when brown people do it, when people from other countries are accused of different things, they quickly label those things as terrorism. And one of the ways to begin to push back is we have to define the narrative. We have to take back the narrative. We can't allow our oppressor to define the narrative and then begin to use his terminology to try to challenge him or try to fight back against a system that's already set up for us to lose. I stand before you today committed to this struggle with you. And I ask that you stand with me in this struggle that we all share. I am truly honored to be here before you today and truly honored to be on the panel with these sisters. I know that what I have shared with you today pales in comparison to what you're going to hear in a few moments. But I want to say to you that this struggle is not going to end if we do not stand together and stand up and stand firm and speak out against the injustice that we know is true, that we know is real, and that we know will not stop if we don't stop it. We have to use the heart, the life, the breath that we were given to do what we know is right. We cannot allow fear. We cannot allow fear to prevent us from standing up and doing what is right and what is just. We cannot allow fear to stop us because we don't know when we're going to leave this earth. And we don't know how we're going to leave this earth. And so we can't be afraid to stand up because of some consequence that we don't know about. Because what I know from my own experience, everything that I was afraid of, when I faced it, it wasn't that bad when I finally faced it. So let's face this demon, this monster, this bully, and face it head on together and stop this injustice that is taking place all over the world in the name of justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward, for sharing that very inspirational speech. We really appreciate you having me here. So just to keep in mind, if you did grab the postcards, the note cards actually, when you first walk in, those were intended to be for Q&A. Just keep in mind that you're more than welcome to write on them. We will have volunteers walking up the aisles to collect them while Linda speaks, inshallah. So our last speaker is Linda, and I had the privilege of being with her earlier today. She's such an amazing woman, mashallah. Linda Sarsour is a working woman, radical justice and civil rights activist, and every Islamophobe's worst nightmare. Ambitious, outspoken, and independent, Linda shatters stereotypes of Muslim women while also treasuring her religious and ethnic heritage. She's a Palestinian Muslim American and self-proclaimed pure New Yorker, born and raised in Brooklyn. She's the executive director of the Arab American Association of New York and co-founder of the first Muslim online organization platform, MPOWER Change. Linda has been on the forefront of major civil rights campaigns, including calling for an end to unwarranted surveillance of New York's Muslim communities and ending police policies like stop and frisk. In wake of the police murder of Mike Brown, she co-founded Muslims for Ferguson to build solidarity amongst American Muslim communities and encouraged work against police brutality. She's a member of the Justice League, a leading NYC force of activists, formerly incarcerated individuals, and artists working to reform the New York Police Department and criminal justice system. Please give a warm welcome to Linda Sarsour.
I'm going to time myself because I get carried away. Assalamu alaikum. I'm from New York, so I'm not impressed. Assalamu alaikum. That's better. So I am very honored and humbled to be here in Cleveland. I've been to Cleveland many times over the years since I've been a child, and I love it here. It's probably like another Palestinian village, like you all know what I'm talking about. And I'm more honored and humbled to be on the stage with, first and foremost, with Sister Julia. You guys have no idea what a gem Sister Julia is in our community on the national level. She is a mentor and a role model for so many of us. And I want her to know how much we love her and appreciate all the work and all the risks that she takes. And I call on all of you to support Sister Julia. Sister Julia, as you probably heard from her bio, has probably every degree that you all dream to have. She far surpasses me in any level. And she could be doing a lot of things, probably making some top dollar somewhere using her credentials, but she chooses to risk her life every day to stand up for your rights and for the rights of all Americans, and I want her to know that we appreciate that. Brother Little, I was moved by you, and moved by your words, your authenticity, your integrity, and I want you to know that we are one. And I will say this, and I will say this, and I've been saying this as a Palestinian American, I believe wholeheartedly that the liberation of Black people is tied to the liberation of Palestinian people. So when Black people are free, but back to something that Brother Little said that I think is important. He said to you in this room, and I'm talking right now specifically to my Muslim sisters and brothers. So for those of you who are not Muslim, you all gotta bear with me a little bit because I gotta talk to my people, right? But you all might learn something too, so it's okay. And you said something that was really important to me, and it really embodies the work that I do. And you said to people in this room, I want you to stand with my community. I want you to stand with my people because I'm standing here with you, right? You heard him say that? Yes. So let's talk about that a little bit. Before I get there, I want to also say that there's a quote that I have in my office, and this quote is very meaningful to me, and I think I want you to listen to it, hear it, absorb it, and let it go directly into your heart. It's a quote by an Aboriginal woman from Australia. Her name is Leela Watson. And she says, "If you have come here to help me, then you are wasting your time. But if you have come here because you believe that your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. That is the premise, sisters and brothers, of how we need to be working in solidarity around the issues that are impacting our communities. So let's start talking about where we're at right now. I'm talking to the Muslims, and I think hopefully, other than the couple of informants that are in the room, we'll put those to the side for a second. Everyone else who's not Muslim in this room is an ally to our community, so I welcome you here. And I think you're going to be part of what I'm calling a family conversation that I want to have with my Muslim sisters and brothers in this room. You know, I stand before you here today, first and foremost, unapologetically Muslim. I'm so proud to be Muslim. I'm more proud today to be Muslim than I was like 20 years ago. I'm also unapologetically Palestinian American. I'm so proud of being Palestinian, and being Palestinian has informed most of the justice work that I do, and I believe that the blood that runs through my veins is the blood of a resilient and strong people, and I hope that I am honoring them and their work to free Palestine. So, why do I say I'm unapologetically Muslim? Because I think that that's not the general consensus in the Muslim community right now. I think we're too busy walking around apologizing for who we are every moment that we get. Sisters and brothers, we have nothing to apologize for. We have everything to be proud for, and we need to start acting like we're proud to be Muslim in the United States of America. I think a lot of reasons why people in the Muslim community think that we have to apologize for who we are. You know, we're always running around trying to condemn things because, you know, that's just how the world works for us right now. And why our young people are so uncertain. They're always like, oh my God, if Donald Trump becomes president, what are we gonna do? And I think the reason why there's so much uncertainty is because we are not teaching our young people what their history is in the United States of America. Sisters and brothers, you live in a country that never existed without Islam. Our faith has been on the shores of this nation before this nation was called the United States of America. I did research on Islam in America, and I found out that in the 1500s, 200 galley slaves came here from North Africa. They were Turks and Moors. Turks and Moors from North Africa. And they helped build the first English colony called Roanoke Colony, which many of you know now is the coast of North Carolina. And then decades later, we went to Africa, and we uprooted people, stole their culture, took them from their families and from their land, and we brought millions of African slaves to the United States of America. About 25% of those slaves were Muslim. Some of the most educated, some of whom were fluent in Arabic, some of whom were scholars of Islam, and we brought them here to the United States of America as slaves. Many of them had to practice Islam in hiding. And it is because of them and their legacy and their risks that they took to maintain their faith is why we can be Muslim in America in 2016. Sisters and brothers, our roots are so deep in this country. Our lineage goes way back in this country. We have to start acting like we belong here, sisters and brothers. This is our country too, and we're not acting like we belong here. So, sisters and brothers, what is going to ground us in this country is understanding our history. There are people out here that wake up every morning to propagate that Islam is some foreign entity, that Islam belongs on some other part of the world, that you belong on some other part of the world. Guess what, sisters and brothers? Just like Black history is American history, Islam is American history. And you need to own that, and you need to hold that, and you need to understand that, because knowing our history is going to give us the courage to continue being Muslim in America. Islamophobia. People always say, Sister Linda, how are we gonna address this Islamophobia that keeps happening in our community? Increase in hate crimes, all these people talking about us and talking about us without us, and all the rhetoric that we're hearing from the presidential candidates. You know, how do we address that? Some Muslims think it's grabbing some pamphlets about Islam and standing on a street corner, thinking that someone is going to be moved by your deed, by your religion, by reading something in a pamphlet. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been moved by reading something on a piece of paper? I don't know about other people. I'm not moved by that. I am moved by experience. I am moved by interactions. I'm moved by human beings. Oftentimes we hear people in our community describing Islam as a religion of peace. Sisters and brothers, you're not adding anything to the conversation by saying Islam is a religion of peace. I believe all religions are religions of peace. So nothing new. But what I don't hear people talking about that attracts me to Islam, that makes me proud to be a Muslim, is that Islam is a religion of justice. At the core of Islam is justice. And justice in Islam is not just us. Nowhere in our history of Islam since the days of its founding by our Prophet has ever there been a time where our Prophet was like, we're only going to stand with the poor Muslims, just the marginalized Muslims. Sisters and brothers, Islam has always been a religion of justice and equality for all people. Now, oftentimes we hear about, people tell you about Martin Luther King, right? Martin Luther King, the civil rights leader. They talk to you about my mentor and hero. He mentors me through his grave, Malcolm X, right? Heroes. But did you know that 1,400 years before there was ever a Malcolm X and a Martin Luther King, you had your own hero, your own human rights activist, racial justice activist, environmental justice activist, a man who cared about the environment and cared about animal rights, a feminist in his own right, and that was our Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. 2 years ago, 3 friends of mine, Alicia Garza, Opal, and Patrice Culler, started a hashtag called Black Lives Matter. Sisters and brothers, you follow a faith where black lives always mattered. Your Prophet uplifted black Muslims, gave them leadership positions, removed them from slavery. He was the one, and many of you know this hadith, and I'm not a scholar, and I'm not standing up here trying to preach and act like I'm an imam, but I am moved by these stories. Your Prophet said that, alayhi salatu salam, that an Arab is not more superior than a white person is not more superior than a black person. This is something that was narrated 1,400 years ago. So your religion is very clear about what it means to be a social justice activist. And oftentimes we go to these Sunday schools and we go to the Friday prayers and we hear these lectures and we are being taught the seerah of the Prophet, which for folks who are not, don't speak Arabic, seerah of the Prophet is the life of the Prophet. Are we emulating the life of the Prophet? Are we following in the life of our Prophet, our racial justice activists, our human rights activists, our feminists, our man that stood up for all marginalized people? We talk about Islamophobia, sisters and brothers, but the first victim of Islamophobia was your Prophet, alayhi salatu salam. Trash was thrown at him. He was assaulted, sisters and brothers. And throughout all the adversaries that he went through, all the challenge and the obstacles, people called him a magician, a liar. He was a cheater, right? Then what happened? I don't know how he did it, but somehow, even through all of that, he was able to convert millions of people across the Arab Peninsula to become Muslim. And we're over here trying to act like we're not proud to be Muslim, like we're retreated, like Islamophobia is supposed to stop us from being who we are. That means we lost deen, sisters and brothers. We lost connection to who we are and what our faith is. Sisters and brothers, I was saying this just a few minutes ago that a lot of people think that the way you're going to teach people about Islam is you're going to sit them down and be like, this is what I believe. I pray this many times a day, I fast, we do pilgrimage, all the stuff that we do. That's nice. That might be some trivia for some people to know. But what really moves people after they leave you? Who cares how many times you pray? Seriously. Who cares that you fast for 30 days in Ramadan? That's not something for people to celebrate with you. That's a personal relationship that you have with God. That has nothing to do with the people you're trying to educate. What's more important to me about what people know about Islam is how you make them feel as Muslims. There was a black woman poet that I'm sure many of you have read and loved, Sister Maya Angelou, may she rest in peace. She said something, I'm going to paraphrase it. She said, it's not about the words. It's about how you make people feel. See, you might leave here today and you may forget every word that we all said up here. Literally. That happens. We got lives. We're going to go home. We got homework. We got to study. You know, things happen. We forget. But I guarantee you, sisters and brothers, you won't forget how people up here made you feel. You don't forget interactions with people. People made you feel bad, empowered, ashamed. Whatever the feeling is, you will remember how people made you feel. So I'm going to tell you a story. Many of you heard about this brother, grandfather, brother, member of our New York City community, Eric Garner. Eric Garner was being harassed by the New York Police Department quite often. And one day, the New York Police Department and the officers took him down to the ground. He was a big guy. And one officer named Daniel Pantaleo started choking Eric Garner. And Eric Garner, in that video, and it was recorded, sisters and brothers, we all watched that video. In that video, Eric Garner asked to breathe 11 times in that video, sisters and brothers. He continued to call out for his breath. And that police officer, Daniel Pantaleo, didn't have no mercy, no rahmah in his heart to let go of Eric Garner's neck until we lost Eric Garner. And that officer, Daniel Pantaleo, still has a job at the New York Police Department. And not only does Eric Garner have a job at the New York Police Department, he has private security paid for by my taxpayer dollars because he's afraid for his life. So a year later, when Daniel Pantaleo was not indicted for his murder of Eric Garner, people in New York City rose up. It was enough, sisters and brothers. We have people in our streets unarmed being killed by law enforcement and no one seems to be held accountable for that. That's not right, sisters and brothers. It's wrong. You can't just sit back and let that happen. So a few months later, it was about 2 months after that, as part of a group called the Justice League, we organized with predominantly young Black and Latinos. And these young people came to me and another sister named Tamika Mallory, another sister named Carmen Perez. Tamika Mallory is African American, Carmen Perez is Chicana, and I'm Palestinian Muslim. And these kids were like, look, we want to do something drastic, something big. I was like, what are you talking about? They said, nobody cares about us. They're killing us out in the streets. Ramali Graham and story after story. You know the names, you know? And I said, what do you want to do? They said, we want to march from New York City to Washington, D.C. I said, do you know that New York City is 5 states away from Washington, D.C.? Do you know that it's 250 miles? They said, we don't care. Maybe somebody will listen to us. Maybe someone will say, we're so crazy. Maybe they'll pay attention to us. Maybe the crazy part is what's going to make them pay attention to us. Sisters and brothers, I and Tamika and Carmen, we're in no position to tell these young people no. We said, all right, we're going to march from New York City to Washington, D.C. On April 13th, which was only the anniversary of our march, was only 2 days ago. We started in Staten Island where Brother Eric Garner was killed, and we went up Route 1 all the way down to Washington, D.C. About 100 of us. 6 of the 100 were Muslim. There were 3 Black Muslims. There was 1 Syrian, 1 Iranian, and then there was me, Palestinian. Now, I was the co-chair of the march. So I thought to myself, this is my chance. How am I going to let these sisters and brothers experience me? How was I going to do that? How was I going to get them to experience my religion, my community, and what I truly stand for? So you know how it is in the community. In any community, you call up your uncle, your father, you know, this one connects you to that one. And eventually I found myself at this mosque in Philadelphia called Al-Hidayah Center, the Gift. This masjid is run by Palestinians. The imam barely speaks a lick of English. I called him up, I said, Assalamu alaikum, brother. Actually, it was a connection to a brother from CARE Philadelphia chapter. And I said, look, we're doing a march. And this is a march to bring awareness around police brutality, around the killing of unarmed Black and Latinos, and mostly people of color. And I'm marching with these young people. We're about 100 people. How big is your mosque? Can we come sleep over one night? And this brother said, sister, this is your house. You and your friends are welcome at our mosque. So we marched, and then the third or fourth day we get to Philadelphia, a tour bus comes and picks us up because this mosque was 25 miles outside of the route. And we get to this mosque, and we get to the parking lot, and the imam and all his board members and the wives and everybody's there. So beautiful, with beautiful smiles. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, sisters and brothers. This is your house. We are honored to have you here. Please come. We walk into the masjid, these beautiful Muslims cook this elaborate meal for us. Even the imam had an apron on, serving food to the people. And then at about 11 o'clock at night, the young people come and knock on my door in the sister section. Young brothers, Sister Linda, where are the people from the mosque? I said, what do you mean? They said, I don't know, we don't see them. I said, well, it's 11 o'clock. They probably went home. Got family. They said, wait a minute, what do you mean? You mean to tell me that this beautiful mosque right here, that this imam and those people left 100 strangers that they never met in their life, and they just left us up in here? That's it? I said, did you hear the imam what did the imam say to you when you first got here? He said, Assalamu alaikum. I said, yeah, after that. He said, this is your house. See, how it works in the Muslim community is that this house that you are in is a house of God. This doesn't belong to the imam or to the board members or to the community. This is a house of God. And all of you are God's creations, which means that this is your house. And the security of this mosque is in your hands until those people from the mosque come back in the morning. You know how empowered those young people felt? You know how moved they were? They started locking doors and they were sweeping up. It was amazing. And then at about 5:30 in the morning, the people come back. And then the imam goes and he's calling prayer, through the loudspeakers, and everybody hears it. Same kids come knocking on my door. They were like, Sister Linda, what's all that? What's going on? I said, that's a call to prayer. They said, wow. I never felt so peaceful inside. What a beautiful sound. I said, yeah, that's beautiful, isn't it? We get up, we pack our stuff, we go downstairs into the cafeteria, the same beautiful faces we met the day before. Breakfast, eat breakfast, and then we're leaving and I see these guys with these boxes and I'm like, what's going on? Cases of water, they had a big box of bananas and tangerines, and they were like, this is for your journey. And the imam said, I'm praying for you. He said, I'm praying for your journey, for you to arrive at your destination in safety, and that God watches over you for every step that you take to where you need to go. It was so moving, sisters and brothers, it's so beautiful. And as we continued our march down to Washington, D.C., do you know how many times those young people asked me questions about my religion? Do you know who the staunchest supporters of our community are going to be? You know, the people who are going to stand up for us when things happen are going to be those 100 young people. Those people are not going to stand for people speaking up against our community because they experience the hospitality, the compassion, and the love and the justice of our community, sisters and brothers. This is how you do da'wah, and this is how you teach people about what Islam is and what we stand for as a community. So I hear a lot of this rhetoric, I don't know if people hear this. People talk about the white allies. Do people hear about that? So let's clarify some things a little bit. Clarify something for you. Muslims, all Muslims, you're not a white ally. I don't care how light your skin is. And I'm going to tell you why you're not a white ally. Because sisters and brothers, 1/3 of the American Muslim community is African American. Black sisters and brothers. So when you get up and get out in a rally because an unarmed boy in your community was shot down by a police officer, you ain't no white ally. You out here marching first and foremost for your own sisters and brothers who gotta be black and Muslim in 2016. So you have to understand what your role is as a Muslim. Understanding that these issues of police brutality, of mass incarceration are directly impacting our community. Just because it ain't directly impacting you, unless you don't think you're part of the larger Muslim community, which is a whole other situation we need to talk about, these are absolutely 100%, quote, Muslim issues. Sisters and brothers, when I was sitting in New York City, and I heard about a 12-year-old boy playing with a toy gun in a park in Cleveland, Ohio, get shot down, not even 2 seconds after police cars show up. His sister wasn't allowed to touch him, no EMTs to revive that baby. And the police officer who shot him still hasn't been held accountable. You know what, sisters and brothers, let me tell you something. Shame on you. Shame on us. Shame on our country to allow this to happen to a little boy and no one is held accountable. You know what that says, sisters and brothers? That you opened the door for that to happen to one of our children. That boy, Tamir Rice, he's our son. He's my son. Actually, my son's name is Tamir, Tamir, it's spelled the same. And when I was on Twitter and I saw Justice for Tamir, that's my son's name. It could easily be my child. My child could be in a park playing basketball like he does with his friends, and something can happen there and my son could be shot down to the ground. Do I gotta wait for only the Palestinian community to come stand up for my child? I want everybody to stand up for my child. I want everybody to say that Tamir Rice, Tamir Jude, which is my son, is your son. We cannot be and have selective outrage and work on selective justice, sisters and brothers. If justice for you ain't everybody, then you are not working for justice, sisters and brothers. Let me talk to the Muslims for a second. I've been kind of talking to you, but now I want to talk. Now I'm going to get real. Like, that wasn't real yet. That didn't go all the way yet. Because I'm never sure with the audience, but you all seem all right. I think I'm going to take it all the way. Sisters and brothers, we have a problem. We have this problem where we think that we have to conform who we are, change our message around, because we want to try to make some folks feel comfortable. That's the opposite of what I do for a living. Sisters and brothers, as Muslims, as Americans, as human beings, we have one job and one job only, and that's to speak the truth. Nothing but the truth. What I want you to understand is that when you speak the truth and someone feels comfortable, that's not on you. That's on the person that's uncomfortable. Let them sit with their discomfort. There's a reason why they are uncomfortable with what you are saying. So don't beat around and be like, okay, I don't want to offend this one, I don't want to offend that one. I don't care about who you're offending. You want to stand up for justice for Palestinians, you want to stand up for justice for black people, for undocumented immigrants, you got to speak the truth, sisters and brothers. And the reason why we are in the situation that we are in is because we're not speaking the truth, and we also don't know who our friends are. So let me give you an example. We have these like armed militias that come and stand in front of the masajid, and we've seen them. Have you seen them in places like Arizona? They come with AK-47s because, you know, open carry states, they stand in front of the masjid trying to intimidate our worshippers that go to the masjid. So what do some Muslims say? MashaAllah, that's the time to do da'wah. Time to go outside. It's hot outside in Arizona. We got, maybe some ice water or something, Maybe some cupcakes. Maybe we hand them each a rose. That will surely soften their hearts. Sisters and brothers, I'm not even mad. But let me tell you where the hypocrisy comes in. So you got resources, because I don't be having resources like that. So you got resources and time to invest in people who have already made up their mind about you, sisters and brothers. But then you don't have the same time to go down the street when there's a Mexican mother, right, whose husband's about to get deported just for being undocumented. And there's a child crying for his mother. You got time to talk to white supremacists in front of your mosque, but you probably don't know the black church around the corner from your mosque. Sisters and brothers, people watch our community. They see our inconsistencies. It's very clear to people who we are and who we want to be friends with, and when we message who we're trying to impress. So when you see the pop-up press conferences, the ones that are like, oh, there's a terrorist attack, get the press conference stuff out, we got to condemn terrorism, I'm not even mad at you. Do that. But let me point out the hypocrisy one more time. Sisters and brothers, we cannot condemn terrorism only when the acts of terrorism are against non-Muslims. We cannot have selective outrage on loss of humanity, sisters and brothers. For me, when a white Christian is killed, I'm just as outraged when a Muslim is killed, when a Jew is killed, sisters and brothers. So if you want to be in the business of condemning terrorism, you better quit your job, because there's a lot of loss of innocent life happening every single day. And when you look at terrorism from the perspective of the national, right? Because we already know what that means. You know, when you hear terrorism, God forbid anybody else commits terrorism, because you know only Muslims do that, right? The biggest group of victims of groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram are Muslims, sisters and brothers. So if you want to condemn terrorism, you condemn all terrorism against all people, including your Muslim sisters and brothers. That, sisters and brothers, shows the integrity of our community. It shows the dignity of our community and the consistency and the sanctity of life that is upheld in our religion as Muslims. So when you start projecting to the rest of the world that somehow our deen, our religion only cares when non-Muslims are killed, what kind of message are you sending to people? That's why people devalue our lives, because we don't even value our own lives. So start thinking about that, sisters and brothers, what you are projecting, and who are you talking to when you talk about condemning terrorism? Who do you hope is reading your message? Who are you trying to help? You know, whose thoughts are you trying to formulate? If you want people to know how consistent, how much dignity and integrity and respect we have our community, then you have to be mourning lives in Paris, in Beirut, in Iraq, and you know what? Yes, lives like Mike Brown's in Ferguson and like Tamir Rice in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm sorry, sister, but I get passionate. You know, I'm trying to make sure I say all the things that I want to just hit on one quick point that when Sister Julia talked about, you know, the anti-BDS legislation. See, there are people out here who are trying to criminalize our right to nonviolent resistance, our right to protest, our freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, sisters and brothers, is supposed to be for all of us. And if it ain't for all of us, then none of us have freedom. And it seems to me like when it comes to anyone who's pro-Palestinian, pro-human rights, pro-justice, that freedom of speech doesn't apply to us somehow. So that's a problem. Because many immigrant Muslims came to the United States of America thinking that, wait a minute, we left these police states and these regimes and these dictatorships we're about to throw down when we get to the United States of America. Then they get here and realize they might as well have stayed back where they came from. Because at least you know what to expect when you live under a dictatorship. Here we are in the United States of America when our young people on college campuses are being targeted for being pro-justice, pro-human rights. When we have people calling on groups like Black Lives Matter to be labeled hate groups, sisters and brothers. This is the United States of America, and that is absolutely unacceptable. But I want to remind you about something, because I think oftentimes we are being educated by folks about, well, if you do it like Martin Luther King did it, then we'd be in a better place. Let me tell you a little bit about people like Martin Luther King. I want to give you some perspective. So people have taught you that Martin Luther King was some guy, right? Who you've been taught the whitewash version. I'm going to tell you the whitewash version. I'm going to tell you the real version after that. The whitewash version is that he was some sort of guy who was conformed to fit this narrow-minded understanding that his whole mission in his life was to bring white people and black people together. That is not what Martin Luther King's mission was, sisters and brothers. Martin Luther King's entire mission and his purpose was to ensure that black people in America had full human rights and they were treated like they were full humans, sisters and brothers. That was first and foremost the purpose and the mission and the risks that Martin Luther King took. So don't let anybody tell you anything else about what Martin Luther King did. Yes, Martin Luther King was a nonviolent civil rights activist, he was a preacher, and yes, he was a negotiator. But you know what else Martin Luther King was? He was a black radical revolutionary. He was blacklisted, sisters and brothers. He was a victim of police brutality. He wrote you a letter from the Birmingham jail. He wasn't immune to the system and the injustices of the system. People hated Martin Luther King. Don't let them put up a monument in Washington, D.C., and everyone's like, I got a day off on Monday in January, and think that people forgot history, sisters and brothers. This is a man that was brutalized. He was vilified. The reason why I tell you that, sisters and brothers, is because oftentimes people are trying to invoke Martin Luther King as our, kind of role model, like we gotta be like, I'm being like Martin Luther King. I'm taking risks. I'm standing up for my community. Let's remember, sisters and brothers, that Martin Luther King was assassinated at the age of 39. That's only 3 years older than I am. So let's not act like Martin Luther King was some little peaceful guy that was like trying to hang out with the white folks and make everybody peaceful. That's not what he was doing. Martin Luther King was standing up for justice, sisters and brothers. He was willing to die for the things that he believed in, sisters and brothers. This is the Martin Luther King that I want you to know. Now, a lot of people invoke people like Malcolm X. I love Malcolm X. I'm telling you, he mentors me from the grave. Malcolm X was one of the most hated men in America. That's just facts. But you know what, sisters and brothers? He was one of the most respected men in America. So what I'm asking you in the Muslim community, and I'm asking all communities of color in particular, we're not out here trying to win a popularity contest. I don't care who likes me. I want to be respected. I want my community to be respected. So let's not go out there trying to fight for acceptance. Let's fight for respect, sisters and brothers. This is what we need in our community. Respect. We need to be respected. For those of us that are in the room today, Arab Americans, South Asians, African Americans, Latinos, our white people of conscience in the room that are here with us and our allies, Jewish Americans. We are sitting in this room today and I want to tell you something very serious. We are in crisis. We are at a juncture, right? We either make it or we don't make it. All we have is each other. I don't put my hopes in any government to do anything for me, in anybody outside of this room to do anything for me. We got to do for each other. And I'm telling you right now that, and I'm going to tell you how I got to this conclusion. I was telling this earlier. I went to Ohio State, and a young brother stood up in Ohio State and asked me a question. And I think he wasn't really asking the question. I think he just wanted to put it out there, kind of hear himself say it, and really it was a message to the people that were in the room. And it was a packed room in there at Ohio State. You know what he said? He was a young brother, maybe 19 years old. I was moved. I left there so moved. Like, I kept thinking about what he said for weeks. He said, Sister Linda, he said, I want to know who lived here at the time of Japanese internment. Who were those people? I said, he said, I don't know who lived in the United States of America and allowed their Japanese neighbors to be picked up and put into camps. I was moved by that question, sisters and brothers. That's a question for all of us. When we hear things like, let's register the Muslims, let's exclude the Muslims, when you got elected officials invoking internment camps, it's not like we don't already have those. We got mass incarceration. We're the largest prison population in the world, 2.2 million people, many of whom are nonviolent offenders, some of whom first-time offenders languishing in prisons in the United States of America, and we're profiting off of them. But we also did do things like internment camps. So when people tell me Donald Trump, oh, he's just saying that stuff, or don't worry about this, they're just saying that to get votes. Don't forget history, sisters and brothers. We live in a country where we passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. We excluded the Chinese. We interned Japanese, our neighbors in this country, picked them up with their children and put them in camps. Slavery. We killed indigenous, I don't want to lay out American history, but what I'm trying to say, sisters and brothers, is we live in a country where we made horrible mistakes, some of which we still haven't repented for. So what I'm saying to you, sisters and brothers, is I don't want you to walk around like this is all normal. We have fascists that are being hailed, and people are going to the polls in droves to vote for people like Donald Trump. So even if Donald Trump is a joke, his followers believe in what he's saying. In a small state like New Hampshire, 101,000 people went and cast their vote for an American fascist. If that doesn't scare you, sisters and brothers, I don't know what scares you. So I'm telling you right now, sisters and brothers, there's only one solution. And that is for us to unite, to stand in solidarity for one another, to show up for one another. Do you know the importance of showing up? for Tamir Rice's mother to turn around and be like, wow, my Muslim sisters and brothers are out here for me. My Latino sisters and brothers are out for me. My white neighbors are out for me. That's the kind of community that we need to build. When Martin Luther King talked about the beloved community, that's when he meant sisters and brothers. He meant when people can see their children in one another. When you see my son and say, that is my son. When I see your child and I say, that is my child. So I ask you, sisters and brothers, today, reflect on what justice means to you. Understand that justice is not just us. That I have never been in a fight that was just justice for Palestinians or justice for Muslims or justice for Arab. That's not the kind of fight that I'm in. I'm in a fight for justice for all people. Because we will never be free if there is someone amongst us who is not free, sisters and brothers. And I'm going to end again just like I started. If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come here because you believe that your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together, sisters and brothers.
So we're going to have a quick Q&A session real quick, inshallah. And these questions, anybody who does feel comfortable on the panel is more than welcome to answer. So the first question is, Malcolm X once said, once they convince you that you have never accomplished anything, you will never be motivated to do anything. The educational system has taught the young black males and females for generations, and in the result has left black people miseducated, undereducated, and ignorant to our roots, culture, and history. This leads and plays a huge part in the school-to-prison pipeline. How do we go about fighting a racist educational system? Check one.
Thank you for that question. How do we go about dismantling an unjust educational system? I think we go about dismantling that system by first understanding it, by understanding its roots, and understanding that none of us, can allow our oppressor to educate our children and expect them to have an education that will liberate them from the oppressor. We cannot, in this country, go to the schools that they set up for us and have our children learn from the curriculums that they set up for us and expect to be free. We have to go back to establishing our own schools and educating our children. And in the meantime, the public education that we pay for, we have to hold our elected officials accountable for what is being taught in the educational policies that are established in this country. Because the educational policies that are established in this country are based on race and based on class. And as soon as we understand that, and understand that it was never meant, particularly for people of color, to even have an education in this country, the sooner we can change this system. I hope that does something to begin to answer that question. And I think that as we work on this issue, we have to work on it as one community. So it's going to take all of us to change the educational system, because if we are sending our children to public schools, then whatever is taught, whatever messaging is taught in those schools, is going to impact all of us. So yes, there is a certain messaging that is designed for black people, but there is also a certain messaging that is designed and detrimental for Muslims. Because first of all, we know what country we live in. We live in a Christian society. And so each and every time a child is asked to pray in class. Is that just? If that is not my religion? Is it just to enforce a religion that is not yours, or a religion that is not someone else's upon it? Is that just? But that's what we do in this country. That's what we do in our schools. Because that might not happen in Ohio, but in other parts of this country, in the South, oh, they're very serious about religious indoctrination and education. And so, as we work to change this system, we have to stand together because it impacts us all.
The second question that's asked is, when it comes to talking about white privilege, a lot of activists often portray anti-white attitudes. How does one prevent an anti-white attitude from coming across?
There is such thing as anti-white. I don't even know if that's true. Like, okay. Excuse me for a second. So, this is a place where we're family. So we're going to have some real talk together. So first and foremost, let's start with this thing that I've heard also before. I'm going to put it out here just in case you ever heard it. So I'm going to dismantle it right here. There's no such thing as reverse racism. The racism that we're talking about is not just from random people in the street that want to tell me to go back to my country. Racism is privilege plus power, right? It's bigotry plus power, sorry. So it's someone in that equation has power to oppress me or is part of the power class, whether or not you personally are engaging in that type of racism. So, I don't know what it means to be anti-white, because I think oftentimes what anti-white means is when people misconstrue when we say we are anti-white supremacy. And I know that millions of American or white Americans who are also against white supremacy. White people are part of many of the social justice movements I know. They're part of climate justice, raise the living wage. They're part of labor. They're in the Black Lives Matter movement. They are leaders in the pro-Palestinian movement. So there really can't be anti-white if those folks are in the movement. I think what it is that when we talk about privilege and power, we need our white allies to understand that this is not about you as an individual. This is not about white people. It's okay to say that I am white and privileged and that I am able to use my privilege to benefit others. And I'm going to give you an example. Yesterday in New York City, we had an anti-Trump rally. And the anti-Trump rally was in front of the New York State Republican Party. They were having a gala, and they were so proud of themselves. Their headliner was Donald Trump. So we were like, hell no, not in New York City, this ain't happening on our watch. So we went. And our white allies, right, because in New York City, the police department is brutal against people of color. They are brutal. And when they arrest us, they charge us for things that are not things we did. So our white allies stood up and said, we got you. We're going to engage in civil disobedience. We're going to walk up into, you know what would have happened if me and Ed walked up into the Grand Hyatt Hotel? They would immediately know why we were going in there. But these courageous, brave, young, white men and women walked up into the hotel, blocked the entrances. Another group of young white folks went around and blocked all the entrances for the limousines to go into the garage. And all those young white folks got arrested yesterday. They used their privilege that they are very aware of in benefit for the fight for social justice and for the justice of their Black, Muslim, and Mexican sisters and brothers. My white friends, and I'm sure that you're asking this question for poly people in your family and others that might be hearing things. When you hear things that may come off as anti-white, that's from a place of trauma. White police officers killing young Black people, and they're not being held accountable. Of course that's not you, right? Young Mexicans and Latinos and others being deported. The no-fly list in the country. People associate that with the power elites who they believe. Our Congress, sisters and brothers, this is not paranoia. 82% of our Congress is white. Old white men, average age 55. So I want my white friends to understand that if they are to be in the struggle with people of color, know that they are organizing with people that are experiencing trauma after trauma, and it's not trauma that's from 450 years ago. It continues until this day. So understand that you are working with broken people, and that you are in this fight so that we can all heal each other and we can become whole. So sit with that for a little bit. Take that as a little bit of a discomfort, but know that people in our communities love you and love anybody that is willing to take the risks and be part of the work that we are doing and be part of the larger movement to uplift all people. And I don't mean all lives matter people, I'm talking about all people. So I'm not dismissing that there sometimes doesn't seem like there's anti-white rhetoric, but I want people to go to the root of that. Where did that come from? And understand that people are dealing with everyday trauma. Some of it goes back and some of it continues till today. So I hope that people will hold that, own that, and still embrace and love and be part of the justice movement.
Thank you for that beautiful response. Our next question is, could you give me more specific examples of the negative effects of the Ohio House Bill 339?
Sure. Well, basically the bill, which says that the courts in Ohio would not be able to consider or give comity to or adopt or basically consider any foreign law that does not give the person before the court all the rights and privileges that are given by the Bill of Rights and by Ohio law here. Now the challenge with that makes it sound like the bill preserves our Bill of Rights, but the issue is if there's a dispute that involves something related to Sharia, for example, how we bury our dead, our wills, our international contracts, those things could be impacted by this because they're saying that the Ohio courts at a threshold level would not be able to consider anything related to Sharia or foreign law as well. Now, the way the lawyers have explained this is that in order to ban Sharia or ban what you think is this foreign law, you have to be able to codify it or define what it is. But as we know, Sharia is our divine law, that is God's law, and then there are the interpretations that people have of it, or their fiqh jurisprudence, how we interpret the law. So, for example, in Oklahoma, the reason it was ruled unconstitutional is because the American court system would have to codify or define what is the corpus of Sharia. And that is, of course, not the way Muslims use or employ their jurisprudence. So basically what the law is doing is stigmatizing the Muslim community. So for example, if you have a dispute related to marriage and family or international custody, for example, if you get married overseas and you have or even divorced overseas and you have a recognition that your marriage is valid or that you were divorced validly, there could be issues with that here in the Ohio courts, as well as issues related to international adoptions. And in order for them to be able to even pass the bill in Ohio, it hasn't passed yet, but for them to try to pass the bill, they've had to make all these kinds of carve-outs so that corporations will not be impacted, because of course they would like corporations to be able to sign contracts with companies in Saudi Arabia or in Indonesia or whatnot. So the challenge is here that they are trying to stigmatize our access to the court or our interpretation of our religious beliefs. If you want to hear more about what has been said about how this bill could potentially impact not just Muslims, but others who are coming with international law that needs to have comity or like recognition, we have a book outside and it's called Foreign Law Bans, and it's basically a research paper about how these bills could impact people. Now, make no mistake about it. These bills are, the people who are perpetrating these bills, in some cases they said, we don't even care if the bill passes. They just want to create a controversy around Sharia because they want to scare people and they want to drive people to the polls. It's a kind of wedge issue to bring out hate mongers. So they've had to contort and twist themselves. In Arizona, when they tried to pass the bill, they even said that they wanted to try to ban karma, right? Because karma is, foreign law. I mean, I didn't know you could actually ban karma. I think that that's something that just happens. But this is how ridiculous it is. And like South Dakota is rushing to pass the anti-foreign, anti-Sharia bill. It's like, do you know any Muslims in South Dakota? I don't even think there are that many. But I used to vacation there. I tell you, I will not go there anymore to Mount Rushmore or to the Black Hills, even though I love the Black Hills so much. That's the heart of it all for the American Indians, those Sioux tribes. Like, I'm not going to South Dakota. And this bill is not gonna pass in Ohio, but everybody has to sign the paper in order to stop it. Even the head of the House Judiciary Committee has told me that he hates all this anti-immigrant stuff, and he does not think the bill is constitutional. So that's good. We have his support. But you have to be very careful because every time the bill fails, they bring the bill back again, back again, back again. And in Florida, where there's a very powerful and very organized Muslim community, that bill passed. So please, I would be so ashamed. I may have to leave care if this bill passes in Ohio, because if this bill can pass, like, what good am I, right? So I need your support on it.
Thank you so much, Sister Julia. The next question is, Muslim youth are often limited in what they can do or even say by their parents, family, community, and culture. The norms of the Muslim community at times does not permit the freedom to unite on a real deep level or to fight injustice. How do we change this within our communities? So the Muslim youth are often limited in what they can or cannot do or even say by their parents, family, community, and or culture. The norms of our Muslim community at times does not permit the freedom to unite on a real deep level to fight injustice. How do we change this within our communities? So basically separating cultural implications within our lives.
All right, so this is where I start getting in trouble. It's my favorite part. So I'm going to answer the question twice. One, I'm going to answer it to the parents, because I see some, and one, I'm going to answer it to the students. And I'm going to start with the parents. And I'm going to say this as a parent. So I just want people to know that I have a 17-year-old son, a 15-year-old daughter, and a 12-year-old daughter. So I want you to know that I'm speaking from experience and that I'm not some young person out here trying to tell you what to do. I am speaking to you as a parent. We do not have a choice in this country right now to tell our children to be silent, to not defend their heritage, their religion. And if we continue to tell our children not to do that, there's going to come a time in this country where we cannot be who we are. There will be generations to come that will not be able to be proudly Muslim in this country. So I want you to understand the actions, right, or the results of your actions now. As parents, we teach our children the basics, right? We raise our children to do the right thing. I raise my children to be courageous. I raise my children I never want my child to come home and tell me this happened to me and someone said this and I was silent. I tell my kids to stand up for themselves. I tell my kids that I need them to stand up for us as a community. So when we silence our young people, particularly the young people who are on the college campuses, and let me tell you why. Most of the historic social justice movements in the country, the women's liberation movement, environmental justice, civil rights, remember that? The student coordinating committee, remember those days? Congressman John Lewis? Congressman John Lewis wasn't 60 years old, old man in Congress back in those days. He was a student on a college campus. So a lot of the social justice movements, they flourish on the college campus. So if the parents are suppressing our kids on the college campus, then what you are doing is that you're holding back our movements here for justice and equality and rights for Muslims, for Arab Americans, and for those that do pro-Palestine. So a lot of parents say to the kids, I don't want you to get involved in that Palestine stuff. There is a reason why in 2016 people still say free Palestine. There's a reason why our kids have Palestine in their hearts is because someone kept that alive. And we need our young people to keep that alive. Don't be afraid of the opposition. Keep your kids courageous. Support them. Love them. We need them, especially right now. For the young people. I don't want you to defy your parents. You know, that's very important to me that you respect your parents. But even in Islam, right? We are to stand up against injustice even if it's from our parents. So if your parents are telling you to do the wrong thing, it is your duty and responsibility to respectfully tell your parents, this one time, my professor said this, but you know what? No. I'm going to go back and tell my professor that what she said was wrong and that I was offended by it, and I'm going to stand my ground and defend my community. You know what? I am going to be part of Students for Justice in Palestine because I'm Palestinian or because I believe in the rights of the Palestinian people, and I think that is the right thing to do. Let your children be courageous. Encourage them, and I encourage the young people, please be courageous. These are going to be tense conversations within our community, but you need to find the moral courage, and sometimes that moral courage is required against our own people in our own community. Some of them who are community leaders, some of them are our parents. So I don't know if I'll ever be invited back after that one, but trying to be honest.
Thank you so much, Linda. So our last question today is referring to the RNC. It's, what advice would the panel give us when dealing with the resentment we people of color or Islam may experience from the visitors of the convention that don't understand or accept our differences? And how do we deal with these issues?
So I'm going to start real quick. First of all, Ohio. Why is the RNC in Ohio? That's first and foremost. So y'all already late. Late. We should have been fighting back and saying we don't want the RNC in Ohio, but that's okay. It's too late now. It's happening. Look.
This is a poor community and they need the money, that's why.
Oh, no, I get the economic issues. But the fact that they are already poor communities, right, is already a problem, right? So that's the issue. So anyway, the RNC, the Republican National Committee, is already coming here, so let's move on from the other reasons why they shouldn't have been here in the first place. Look, not everybody in the Republican Party is some vicious white supremacist and are coming out here to hurt people or to be anti-Muslim. Let's be clear, right? We know a lot of people in the Muslim community who used to be Republicans because they were conservative on fiscal issues or whatever. So I don't think we should blanket the entire, Republican Party or people who consider themselves to be Republican and say, here are a bunch of racists that are coming to our community. But there are going to be a pretty significant segment, many of whom are supporters of some of the candidates, who are absolutely white supremacists, who are absolutely people who don't care about law and order, as we've seen them at those rallies, including supporting candidates who are willing to pay for their legal support if they happen to get in any trouble. So this is my suggestion. That communities here leverage, because I'm going to be here, by the way, just so you all know. I'm coming. A lot of groups are going to be here. And we're not coming here to stir trouble in Ohio or anything, but we're going to leverage the attention on the RNC to focus on some of the most important issues. Like, for example, God forbid we have a Republican that's going to be in the White House, we might not ever have any progress on things like climate justice. We're going to die, sisters and brothers, if we don't do something about the climate. So there are going to be environmental justice folks. So what I'm saying to the local folks in Ohio is find an issue, stand together, potentially hold an event down the street from the RNC, give people an alternative, right? Maybe some of those folks to be like, hey, I heard there was going to be an event with some Muslims, like, I don't know Muslims, I don't think I hate Muslims, let me go down there and see what those people are doing. When they get there, they find Muslims and black Muslims and black folks and Latinos. I mean, this is an opportunity for you to potentially protest peacefully, send a message. Leverage the opportunities to put your issues forward. Ohio is not a state that's in primetime television. Like, no, like other than the Tamir Rice story and maybe a scandal here and there, that's about all we know. Buckeye maybe sometimes, only because my son watches sports, but that's pretty much it. So how does the Ohio social justice movements, how do people of color in Ohio leverage the RNC to highlight their issues? Obviously, you need to practice non-Kingian nonviolence. These people may provoke you, so I'm not saying this is for everybody, but I think that there should be a core group of people who know how to deal with agitators to come out and really stand up, do events, do protests, do vigils, something to raise awareness on the issues that impact you most.
And I think we all have something to say about the RNC. I would again remind people there's dozens of different events and things happening, but two of the really big ones where they want the Muslim community to try to plug in on. One is the poverty march, because there's so much poverty in this country and so much, the wealth gap is increasing exponentially, and some communities don't have enough money for school books, and other communities have, living in the glitterati lifestyle. It's really unfair. So the poverty march is very, very important. So we want people to take part in that. I think Don is here. I don't know if he brought flyers on this, but it'd be good if he did. Don, can you raise your hand if you're out there? Okay, there he is, right there. Don Bryant. I think he's Palestinian, but he isn't. But he's probably the biggest Palestinian in Cleveland. So he does so much work for the Palestinian people and so many causes, including care, environmental rights, Black Lives Matter. He's glue that kind of holds this whole community together. So see him about the RNC and as well as the People's Convention, and we would like people to put on forums in the People's Convention. And there are other things too, and he can tell you about those. Now the other thing is we are working on, and Ed and I have been working on this, a number of people. We're very concerned that the city of Cleveland, just like the other conventions as well, they have $50 to $60 million for security, about $20 million of which they're going to use basically in secret without telling us. They're going to purchase a lot of equipment. We don't even know what it is. We're very concerned about crowd control weapons and equipment, things that are very harmful to people, and we're very concerned that the Cleveland Division of Police don't know how to use that equipment. So a lot of us are pushing back on this issue with City Council because we want to make sure that people are able to protest peacefully and that everybody is safe, including the people at the convention and the people who may be visiting or protesting or just visiting in the city. So we're trying to get some transparency on this issue. It's a key issue. There definitely will be activities going on, and you should really plug into this. And I think our community needs to be part of this. We can't be silent. Having the Trumpster and Ted Cruz coming to town, and I just want to say, Ted Cruz's foreign policy advisor is Frank Gaffney, who's the one that's working on the anti-Sharia bill. So Ted Cruz has surrounded himself with very long, well-known Islamophobes and anti-Muslim activists. So if you're concerned about Trump, that's one thing, but Ted Cruz is really systematic in his bigotry toward the Muslim community. So we can't just let this RNC happen and the Muslim community not be part of this. So link up is, I guess, what I have to say.
In closing, I would just like to say that, one, to the point that Sister Julia made, was that there's going to be a lot of equipment that is bought by our city government and county government to surveil us, not only during this convention, but they get to keep this equipment after the convention is over. And so this equipment will be used to monitor us from now on. And so I say that to say that the RNC is going to come and go. But the issues that we have, the issues that unite us, will be here for us to deal with. And we have to stand together and support one another's movements and work together to fight against these issues and the issues of injustice that we face every single day. So we have to commit to fight injustice together beyond the RMC. And so that is my plea to everyone here, is to commit to standing together from this day forward.
And I swear to God, Sister Julia, they paid me to do this. I'm just going to do this last closing. Sisters and brothers, you have someone in your community that knows everything that's going on. Don't tell me you're misguided, you don't know where to start, you don't go, I want to get involved, but I don't know where. Right here, CARE. And I'm going to tell you something really quickly about CARE. A lot of people say, oh, I don't know about CARE, I hear these things about CARE, but I'm going to give you one quick point. The NAACP was a blacklisted organization in this country. Hunted down by hate groups. Their leadership detained back in those days, right? Some people dropped the NAACP at that time because they didn't want to be affiliated, but there were some who stood with the NAACP. Now guess what happened to the NAACP in 2016? They could pick up the phone and call President Obama and they'll be in his office tomorrow morning. So I want you to remember history, that those organizations that were the most vilified were the most effective organizations. And you want to be here 50 years from now and be like, oh, I was there for CARE 30 years ago. And then 30 years from now, CARE will be one of the largest and most mainstream civil rights organizations in this country, not just fighting for the rights of Muslims, but fighting for the rights of all people. So you want to know how to get involved? This sister right here needs you. Our community needs you. And I'm counting on you to support Sister Julia and all the work that CARE Ohio does.
And one important way you can do that is, of course, sign the petition today, sign up on our mailing list, but also our 14th annual Civil Rights Banquet is on Sunday, May 8th. It's Mother's Day. We're even having Brother Bashir Jones come in and do a Mother's Day tribute, so mothers have to be there. We are bringing Murtaza Hussein from New York. He's a journalist at The Intercept. The Intercept is the online excellent place of journalism where Glenn Greenwald, basically he started it, and that's the journalist that Edward Snowden went to in Hong Kong. He met Edward Snowden in Hong Kong. So this is his newspaper, and we're bringing a Muslim journalist from this. It's an online web news service, and he's written amazing things. So he's coming along with Ala Al-Sayed, who's with ISNA Canada, and it's going to be a great event. So we really need you to come out on May 8th. You can pick up, everybody should take an invitation. And if you cannot come, please send back the envelope of support. You can, if it's $10, $25, $100,000, whatever you want. But just everybody doing a little bit is what Prophet Muhammad asked us, peace be upon him, asked us to do. So please support that.
That wraps up the Q&A session for us today. Thank you so much for our panelists for sharing all that beautiful information with us. We actually have one more individual coming up to the stage. She's an individual that I had the privilege of meeting earlier today. Her name is Fatma Shendi. She's such an intellectual and beautiful individual, and she will be sharing her poetry with us. Can we all give a warm welcome to Fatma Shendi?
My name is Fatima Shendi. Before I start, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm so privileged. I'm like almost in tears right now, but I really got to keep it in because my mom is here, my role models are here. I'm just trying to consume myself. This poem that I wrote, can everybody hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
This poem I wrote is based on an idea by W.E.B. Du Bois. It's called Double Consciousness. I don't understand what it's like to be Black. I don't understand what it's like to be Latino. I only understand what it's like to be Muslim, and that's the only kind of pain I can assimilate with. And W.E.B. Du Bois says something about double consciousness. He says, what a blessing and a curse it is to always see yourself through the eyes of others before your own. It's this problem we have as Muslim Americans. That's why we always tend to apologize before we introduce. My mother always told me we are too comfortable validating what we're not rather than affirming who we are. And I love you, Mama. so sorry. Please be patient with me. I'm really nervous. I'm proud.
Breathe, take a deep breath. Bismillah, Bismillah, Rahman.
So this is called double consciousness. Double consciousness. Imagine a softness and a hollowness, a destination and a journey. It's like a fortress built on hollow brick. You see, the foundation didn't properly mix. You see, our foundation didn't properly stick. It's as if home is where the heart is, but the heart is homeless and homesick. On corners, begging for quarters, searching for where the soul sits, or maybe just where it could hurt less. It's like holding hands with clenched fists. Rather than staying close to where the soul sits, we found substance and lost surface so we can talk about the Oscars and the Emmys, but the term prejudice makes us nervous. If it isn't measurable, it doesn't concern us. We told our children sticks and stones are the only signs that we know of, that words are just empty air, but we inhale it as a stimulant. We can measure the breaths of influence since we need science to prove significance, but our actions catalyze influence. Our silence could imprison the pure and innocent. Our silence showed freedom doesn't always mean equivalence. And I'm not saying to devolve or let your demons get involved, but we can't just put a wall around things and then tell them problem solved. Everything emotional and critical has just become noise. I'm bilingual, but not all languages spoken contain voice that burnt the bittersweet taste in your tongue that made your words feel worthless. Those bridges burn voices, ya Allah. They could have lit torches, and then they have the audacity to tell me that silence is golden. They told us talk is cheap, so we left our words choked and swollen. They housed a home beneath my bitter tongue. I have swallowed an entire ocean. Remember, silence is golden and money talks, but you can't feed minds the way you feed mouths. You can't simply thrive on the possessions on shelves. I promise you, the unfed mind devours itself. But this is not a poem about pity. This is not about you walking a mile in my shoes. My shoes walk by memories, not by cities, not by statistics and logistics. Visually, the human soul has endured more than quantum physics and diluted publicity. Is it more important to be myself than to condemn the actions you carelessly think of me? This is not a poem about filtered contrasts. They have created the 50 shades of hate that we have removed from televisions but prove in reality each day. That have no words, but we recognize its scent when it comes in. Hate is no stranger, it needs no introductions. Who knew perspective on pedestals could have more rights with less limits? See, maybe that's because my ancestors had strong backs but broken English. See, what I have seen as injustice has been renamed mere privilege. But this is not about the shades of melanin that has your porous bones unsettling. This isn't a poem about the generic versus the genuine, the Mayflower to Assad's regiment. This is a poem about big rooms filled with bigger elephants. You have the right to remain silent, but the silence has left us settling. We tell ourselves, I am one man, as if it is a deficit to our soul's element. When will we understand that being one is the only prerequisite? How many revolutions did we leave translucent? What if I had a dream, was left a dream and not a movement of moments? The truth was illuminated by the people. We hold these truths self-evident that all men are created equal. And remember when Malcolm X was told by his teacher to remain mediocre. She told him you'd be better off a carpenter than you could ever be a lawyer. And that's the thing about hatred. It has absolutely nothing to lose. So when it steps in, shame isn't even a shadow in the room. But Rosa Parks made a statement just by refusing to get up. She wasn't saying she wasn't less. She was declaring, I am enough. December 1st, 1955, she was a subtle storm with no signs of trouble. This woman moved mountains without moving a single muscle. Tell me, What would we become if our eyes were just screens, our voices were just recordings, and our minds were sold antiques? Tell me, what would we be without a beating heart and two lungs? You know that they say the intention of the heart lies beneath the tongue. Movements don't mean violence. You are a movement with a mindset. You see, that's why they told you to stay silent, because your words disprove science. So if you don't understand anything I've said, at least remember this. You can create movements that are birthed from the air pushing through your lips. The absolute least that we could do is absolutely everything.